Hello, I'm Tony Guida. This is my New York. Playing baseball in a pandemic has produced its share of discordant moments, none more so, perhaps, than this. In August, Major League Baseball celebrated the centennial of the Negro Leagues. Not mentioned, however, in that ceremony was baseball's shameful history of shunning those leagues and their superb players. But that may be about to change. Baseball is in discussions now to right its historic wrong. My guest today is hopeful. He is president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City. Bob Kendrick, next. Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Museum in Kansas City. Welcome to the program. It's good to see you.
Tony, thanks so much for having me.
I want to know, first of all, what can you tell us about these deliberations by Major League Baseball to possibly recognize finally the Negro Leagues?
Well, it certainly would be a long overdue recognition in terms of the acknowledgement that the Negro Leagues were exactly what they were, a professional baseball organization. Now, from our standpoint, Tony, have we ever dwelled on that lack of acknowledgement? No. And all the players that I got to know who were part of the Negro Leagues certainly did not feel that they needed that validation for them to understand that they were playing some of the best baseball that was ever played in this country. But for baseball fans, I do think that this would be a level of vindication in that acknowledgement that these leagues were as professional as any. And so we obviously have a vested interest in hoping to see that this might happen.
Yeah, well, that it might happen, especially at a time when there is this national reckoning on about race in this country, I think would be not only fitting, but would lend even greater weight to it.
Oh, no question. There's no question. And I think the climate that we are living in now and the 100th anniversary of the birth of those Negro Leagues formed right here in Kansas City, February 13th, 1920, I think gives even more credence for something like this to happen. The national attention that has been brought to this milestone anniversary and the heightened awareness of the Negro Leagues, I think adds a little bit more fuel to this effort. And so hopefully it will have an impact.
You mentioned the centennial, of course, of the Negro Leagues, which it is, and Major League Baseball celebrated it back in August. I think it was a Sunday.
Yes, August 16th.
Yeah, and your museum was very much part of that.
Yeah.
And yet, is there some sense of irony or whatever else you might want to call it, that here's Major League Baseball celebrating the Negro Leagues at the same time they don't recognize the Negro Leagues?
Yeah, and again, I think for the baseball purists, that becomes a little bit of a sticking point. Major League Baseball and of course now Major League Baseball's Players Association have been partners of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum for quite some time. And as you well know, many Major League teams have consistently celebrated their Negro Leagues history, whether it's here in Kansas City or Baltimore, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, places like that had very rich Black baseball heritage. They've long celebrated the Negro Leagues. This year was the first time, though, that all 30 Major League teams kind of wrapped their arms around the Negro Leagues as part of this 100th anniversary celebration that we kind of initiated with Major League Baseball. So yeah, is there a little irony? Of course. But I don't know if too many people before this really became made more publicly aware even knew that this was even an issue. And so now that people are more aware of it, the average fan had no idea. But then again, the average fan had no idea that the Negro Leagues existed. And so, yeah, no less whether or not they were recognized by Major League Baseball. So there really had not been that much thought given to that particular footnote in baseball history.
I'm going to say that I hope in the next half hour, we're going to be educating fans to things they should have known about. And I'm going to say baseball's, despite all of its support, baseball's history in this regard is shameful. And it's shameful when you look at how long Major League Baseball was segregated.
Mhm.
It's shameful when you look at the ball players that were never considered major leaguers and weren't allowed in the major leagues. Let's talk about some of these guys. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a way to. I mean, the first one that comes to mind, of course, is Satchel Paige, who was probably many considered the greatest pitcher of all time.
Yeah.
Any white, black, yellow,
Yeah.
green, Satchel. Talk a little about Satchel.
Man, we ain't got enough time, Tony. We have to do a whole show dedicated to Satchel
Yeah, I
because
know.
he was that special. He was really that special. And for me, there's no comparison to anyone as it relates to Satchel Paige, particularly when you look at the longevity. By his estimation, he pitched in over 2,600 games. The great stuff. Recorded some 55 no-hitters and only God knows how many strikeouts. And the charisma. He could sell it.
Oh, he was a showman. He
Oh,
was
yeah,
just
no,
a,
he could
he was
sell it.
just an extraordinary showman.
But Tony, he could also back it up. We know for certain the oldest rookie in the history of Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Major League Baseball says that old Satchel was 42 years old when he finally got his opportunity to pitch for the Cleveland Indians in 1948 as a rookie.
Helped them catch it. It was a major factor in them getting the pennant.
Oh, absolutely. They don't win the pennant without Satchel that year. Satchel goes 6-1 with a 2.4 ERA. Now, keep in mind, he didn't get called up until July of 1948, so he didn't spend the entire year. He goes 6-1 with a 2.4 ERA his rookie season at age 42, which means he was likely closer to 52.
Yeah.
Cleveland would win the World Series. Yeah, led by Satchel Paige and Larry Doby.
Beyond the statistics, Bob, as you've suggested, is the man. He was so charismatic, and in those barnstorming events. I mean, he was just such a showman. I mean, he would sometimes tell his fielders behind him, get off the diamond. I'm going to handle this by myself. And he would.
No, and as a result, people flocked to see the old man pitch. If he rode into a town, Tony, that had 1,500 people in it, there might be 1,300 at the game. The entire town would shut down to watch him do his thing. His reputation had preceded him. And so he actually takes a pay cut to go to the major leagues. Yeah. Because in the Negro Leagues and along the barnstorming circuit, it made Satchel one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid player in the country, because he was savvy enough to negotiate a percentage of the game. But he wanted to prove to the world, because no matter what they had done in building the Negro Leagues, the world still said the highest level that you could play baseball in this country was in the major leagues. And so he wanted to prove to the world that he was as good as anybody, and he was.
I think he did. And getting back to this point of Major League Baseball's tortured relationship with these men and with this league, it's my understanding when Satchel was selected to the Hall of Fame, I think it was 1971.
Yes.
That Bowie Kuhn, who was the commissioner at the time, suggested to Satchel, we want you to head up the new Negro wing, as if Kuhn had never heard of separate but equal, which of course was never, when things were separate, they were never equal.
Yeah.
I mean, bottom line, a terrible insult. And I think what I'm told, Satchel just basically turned and walked away from that.
Well, fortunately, the Hall of Fame came to their senses and did not separate the players from the Negro Leagues. There had already been enough separation that had gone on in our sport. And to think that these players who you were now welcoming into your hall by wanting to put them in a separate wing would have added insult to injury. And we go back even a little bit further. Ted Williams.
Yeah.
Great Ted Williams. It was Ted Williams who, if you were going to point to any one individual that led to Negro Leaguers being inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, it was Ted Williams. because you have to recall in 1966, when Ted was being inducted himself, he used his induction speech to advocate on behalf of Negro League players.
And I hope that someday the names of Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson in some way can be added as a symbol of the great Negro players that are not here only because they were not given a chance.
He essentially says, I hope someday the likes of Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson will be inducted into the Hall of Fame as symbols of those great black stars who weren't there because they'd never been given an opportunity.
Exactly.
5 years later, Satchel goes in. But what that also tells me is that Ted Williams understood how good these guys were. And for me, the great athlete appreciates other great athletes. And he took his day, which was a tremendously bold move on his part in 1966, to use that moment in time to advocate for those players. And then later, Satchel in 71, as you mentioned, and then a pipeline of Negro Leaguers are inducted, basically year in and year out for quite some period of time.
Yeah, I think 35 now in the
35 Negro League players and or officials are enshrined in the Hall of Fame, and there's still others who absolutely deserve to be there, including our very own John Buck O'Neill, the founder of this great museum, legendary Negro Leaguer in his own right.
Well, Bob, I want to put a bow on what you're saying in terms of how great these players were. And perhaps some in our audience right now are thinking, oh, of course, he's going to say that. He's an advocate. He's the president of the Negro League. But I'm a baseball fan. I've been a baseball fan, for all my life. And unfortunately, it's my team always disappoints me, almost always, the New York Mets. But But I bowed, and I want people to know, and if they don't know, they can come to your museum in Kansas City, or at least go to your website. The extraordinary talent there was in the Negro Leagues. For instance, I think I recall the Dizzy Dean, one of the icons of the Cardinals, and
yes.
I think Dizzy Dean once said of Satchel Paige, he's the best pitcher I ever saw. And
Joe DiMaggio thought the same thing.
Yeah. And so people ought to, if they don't know, they need to educate themselves. Since we're talking about it, I want to quickly get to a couple other names, but we can't get to all of them. But since we're talking about Satchel, we got to talk about his, I think it was his roommate on the road, Cool Papa Bell.
Papa Bell.
Who
the legendary James Thomas Cool Papa Bell.
Yeah.
First and foremost, the greatest nickname in baseball history, bar none.
It's sure.
Bar none.
But, and about whom Satchel was supposed to have said, because Cool Papa was known for speed. He was the fastest thing on two legs. I mean, faster than anything we've seen since.
Right.
He
was so fast, Tony, that the legendary Jesse Owens, who at that time was the fastest man in the world, he would never race Cool Papa Bell. Flat out refused to race Cool Papa Bell. Now, Jesse Owens would race horses around the bases, but never Cool Papa Bell.
And about him, Satchel, talking about his speed, said Cool Papa was so fast he could flip the light switch and be in bed before the room got dark.
And that is actually a true story. That is a very true story. Now, what Satchel didn't talk about was that Cool got him and bet his meal money, and that light had a shortage in it. So as you mentioned, Satchel and Cool were teammates on the 1935 Pittsburgh Crawfords, and when they traveled, they were roommates. And on this particular instance, Cool gets to the hotel room before Satchel does. He walks in the room, he flips the light switch on, there's a delay before the light comes on. He flips the light switch off, there's a delay before the light goes off. Cool says, When Satchel gets to the room, Cool is waiting on him. Roomie, I'm so fast, I can flip this light switch off, get in bed, cover up before the room gets dark. And Satchel's like, Cool, you fast, but you ain't that fast. And so Cool Papa bet his meal money, and old Satchel took the bait. And in one of the greatest sports pranks of all time, because that light had a shortage in it, Cool was able to flip that light switch off, run over, hop in bed, cover up before the room went completely dark. Satchel was so outdone that he just always told folks that Cool was that fast.
I love that story. I love that story. And maybe we should the final point we should make about Cool Papa is one of the greatest base stealers of the modern era, who just died unfortunately, Lou Brock,
Yeah,
learned how to steal bases
Cool
from
Papa Bell. Lou knew who Cool Papa was. He's just a young ball player. He's surprised that Cool Papa Bell wants to talk to him. And so they meet, and he says that Cool Papa started telling him some stuff about base stealing. And he says, well, Cool Papa, I've never seen this in the book. Cool Papa looks at him and says, because it ain't in the book. And Lou would become one of the most prolific base stealers in Major League Baseball history. When he set the stolen base record, who was there to greet him? Cool Papa Bell.
Wow. Well, folks, you mentioned a couple of the other names, but folks ought to look up the men of the Negro Leagues and find out just how good they were. I want to ask you about this this time and this conversation, confrontation, whatever you want to call it, about race the country is having. If a young person, black or white, were to study the African-American experience vis-a-vis baseball, what would that young person learn, do you think?
Well, specifically as it relates to the Negro Leagues, I think they will see how triumphant this story is. Because you alluded to it earlier from the standpoint that what created a need for the Negro Leagues was shameful. Segregation is a horrible chapter of this country's history, not just baseball, but this country's history. But out of segregation rose this wonderful story of triumph and conquest. And Tony, it's all based on one small, simple principle. You won't let me play with you, I create a league of my own. And I don't know if you'll find a story that is more American than the story of the Negro Leagues. A league that had been born out of segregation would ultimately become the driving force for social change in this country. A league born out of exclusion opened its door to any and everybody who could play. The only criteria was, can you play? And if you can play, you can play. And this would, of course, be the league that would give us Jackie Robinson. And there's no question that Jackie Robinson's breaking of baseball's color barrier was not only a part of the civil rights movement, it was actually the beginning of the civil rights movement. And Jackie is handpicked from the great Kansas City Monarchs, 1945. Yeah, Jackie walked the streets right above where my office is right now in 1945. And that jettisoned the civil rights movement in this country. So all of that is woven into this amazing story of these courageous athletes who refused to accept the notion that they were unfit to play this game.
You know, and perhaps we should mention, well, we certainly should mention that Jackie Robinson's entrance into the major leagues in 1947 not only opened the door for African Americans, but for Latin players. And,
absolutely.
And so we got people like Roberto Clemente and the Alou brothers and so many others. But at this time, Bob, as we speak, baseball is still almost bereft of African American players, and certainly of coaches, managers, owners. I mean, it's still a white man's club.
Yeah. One of the things that I oftentimes talk about, particularly when young urban kids walk into the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, Tony, is that they get to see people who look just like them, who played this game as well as anyone ever played this game. But not only did they play the game, they owned teams. They were managers. They were traveling secretaries. They were team physicians. They fulfilled every role that you could take on in the business of the game of baseball. And that is vitally important as well, because when we look at what happened with the integration of our sport, it was primarily focused on the field. Yeah, the other aspects of baseball business really did not get fulfilled by African Americans. You think about this. You don't get your first African American coach in Major League Baseball history until 1962 with Buck O'Neill with the Chicago Cubs, 15 years after Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier. You don't get your first African American manager until Frank Robinson in the 1970s. Your first African American GM and Bill Lucas in the 1970s. So that hierarchy was really never fulfilled. Those great minds in the Negro Leagues did not transition into Major League Baseball. So these things have to be addressed.
And on the subject of Major League Baseball, considering now, trying to find a way apparently to finally recognize the Negro Leagues, some of the folks that I've talked to have suggested that it's an earnest effort, but it's a huge, pushing a huge boulder up a hill. So I guess in general, do you see the stumbling blocks? What do you think they might be to this recognition that you're hoping for?
I think when you go back and fully examine the Negro Leagues, and it's still one of the toughest things for people to accept, even those who come to the Negro Leagues Museum, Tony, is that there were two professional baseball leagues operating simultaneously to one another. One we know virtually everything about, or we've got a place where we can turn to learn any and everything about it, the Major Leagues, which gave the opportunity for the best white athlete to showcase his world-class baseball ability. The other, the Negro Leagues, we know virtually nothing about, that did the exact same thing for the best Black and, as you mentioned, Hispanic ball player to showcase their world-class baseball abilities. But both of these leagues were professional.
But fundamentals like statistics, they weren't, they weren't kept.
Well, they were kept. They just got.
I mean, in many cases, they were. I mean, I read of one player who said, I think Satchel said at one time, I struck out so many guys, or 5 and 10 in a row or something, but they didn't bring the scorebook that day, so there's no record of it.
Well, because you're balancing league games against barnstorming games for the exact same reason that you're talking about, where they were trying to make more money. The Kansas City Monarchs might take the Chicago American Giants from Kansas City all the way to St. Louis and play games on the way to St. Louis that weren't official league games. But when we start to really examine the Negro Leagues, and you start to look at the worldwide impact that the Negro Leagues had, the game is a global game in large part to the Negro Leagues. Because you have to remember, the Major Leagues weren't doing that level of barnstorming that you saw in the Negro Leagues. So the Negro Leagues would take baseball into Canada. They were oftentimes the first Americans to play in many Spanish-speaking countries, and believe it or not, a touring team of Negro Leaguers that introduced professional baseball to the Japanese. Yeah, the Japanese had been playing baseball, but they had not seen professional baseball until 1927. Man, this is 7 years before Babe Ruth and his All-Stars go to Japan. They've been commonly credited with having taken professional baseball to the Japanese, but it's not true. It was a team called the Philadelphia Royal Giants. So as more of this information starts to come out, it certainly validates the level of play. You go into Griffith Stadium and Clark Griffith was watching the Homestead Grays outdraw his Washington Senators. Yeah. And that was the case in many major league ballparks across this country, because what the Negro Leagues lacked was funding. They didn't have the deep pockets that the major league teams had, so very few of them had their own stadiums. And when we really dive into what took so long to integrate the game, Major League Baseball was making money from the Negro Leagues. Yeah, they were making money from the Negro Leagues. So when the Homestead Grays rented Griffith Stadium, Clark Griffith was getting a percentage of the gate and likely all of the concession. And
sure,
while
they drew people to the ballparks.
Oh man, they filled the ballpark up. Yeah. And so Clark Griffith wanted to sign Buck Leonard and Josh Gibson years before Branch Rickey made the move to bring Jackie Robinson. But he had a double-edged sword, Tony, because he's watching Buck Leonard play a dazzling first base. And he's watching Josh Gibson hit balls where no mere mortal had ever hit them. And he knew if he signs them, that his Washington Senators immediately jump into the forefront for contention for a pennant. But the other side is what I just talked about. He was also watching all these black folks fill up his ballpark. And if he puts the Negro Leagues out of business, he's going to lose a piece of money.
Also, if he tried to sign them, he was going to be probably thrown out of the white man's club.
He was going to be ostracized.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. So now you got to weigh the risk. Is the risk worth it? But again, do I want to take away a source of income from me?
Yeah.
The answer was no.
There's so much more to talk about, Bob, and I wish we could. But I wish you success in seeing eventually this recognition. We hope it comes.
If it happens, it happens.
And for folks who might have been enchanted by some of our stories here, there's plenty to learn at the Negro Baseball League Museum in Kansas City. And if you can't make it to Kansas City, they have a website, and there's a lot you should be looking at and reading up on about these players in these leagues. I really appreciate it, Bob. I thank you, and good to see you. Good luck with the rest of the year.
Hey, Tony, thanks so much for having me, man. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, bye-bye.